Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the English Honors Colloquium. My name is Dean Clement, and it's a pleasure to see you here at the first gathering of our spring season. As I was explaining to my class earlier today, the colloquium was dreamed up by the English Honors Program to showcase the fantastic, valuable, and interesting scholarship of our colleagues in the department. Since we don't often attend the same conferences, it's rare for us to hear about one another's scholarship. As the MC, I suppose I can speak for all of you and say that these events have been a smashing success and utterly edifying. We're so excited for this season. February 23rd features Dr. Emily Thrush. On March 23rd, we'll host Dr. Scott Sunball. And on April 13th, we'll close out with Dr. Eric Schlick. Schlick? Sounds like a beer. All on Mondays at 4 p.m. So put those dates down in your calendar and make plans to attend those future events. But you're here now, so let's begin. We're delighted today to host Professor Verner Mitchell. Professor Mitchell primarily focuses on women writers of the Harlem Renaissance, with special attention to the lesser known and perhaps understudied figures in the school. He's the author of Literary Sisters, Dorothy West and Her Circle, a biography of the Harlem Renaissance on Rutgers Press, and Images in the River, the life and work of Warren Cuny on Texas Tech University Press. His most recent book, In Flaming Letters, Lucia Pitts, Poet of the 6888, forthcoming from the University of Virginia Press, is the subject of today's talk. Would you please help me welcome Professor Verner Mitchell?
Thank you. And actually, the book is hot off the press. It's been out for about a month, so excited about that. Well, let me thank the Honors Committee for inviting me, and I thank all of you for your support, and maybe the gods are blessing us with good weather. So so this actually benefited from that extra week in preparing the talk. When the committee asked me to speak, it hadn't occurred to me that February was Black History Month, and I didn't realize until a couple of days ago this is actually the 100th anniversary of Black History Month, which was founded in 1926 by the historian Carter G. Woodson at Howard University. And actually, Lucia Pitts and Dr. Woodson traveled in similar circles, social and intellectual, in Washington, D.C. So I think this talk on Pitts is fitting or appropriate just on many levels. And with that, I will get into the formal talk. And I'm going to try to stand. If I get too tired, I'll sit. But I think I can stand until the Q&A. Lucia Pitts, poet of the 6888. Professor Nellie McKay was one of the first scholars to bring attention to the writing of African American women authors. She observed that, quote, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there were dozens of African American women who were extraordinary people, largely ignored by the world outside of their immediate spheres, and in spite of many obstacles, these women broke through significant barriers to achieve impressive records of success, many in professional fields previously closed to them: education, belles lettres, medicine, the arts, music, journalism, and science, for example. Lucia May Pitts, the subject of this talk, was one of those extraordinary people. When Pitts published her work in the popular poetry column, Lights and Shadows, in the Chicago Defender in the mid-1920s, she could not have anticipated the ways in which her poetry would illuminate her future service with the 6888 Battalion of the Women's Army Corps, and her stellar career as an administrator and advocate for African American women in the federal government. When her first poems appeared, a reader wrote to Robert S. Abbott, the editor of the Chicago Defender, quote, we've always given you credit for knowing when you had a good find, and Lucia Pitts is it in the fullest sense. Scholars have begun to recover and revitalize the lives and work of underappreciated 20th century African American poets. Gwendolyn Bennett, Warren Cuny, and Helene Johnson have received considerable attention, yet their talented contemporary, Lucia M. Pitts, remains largely ignored. Like Bennett, Cuny, and Johnson, all of whom continued to write long after the Harlem Renaissance and well into the civil rights and black arts movements, Pitts is difficult to label or categorize. A poet, a World War II veteran, and a career administrator, she was a self-described racial guinea pig who took seriously her obligations to uplift the race and open doors for others. She was a member of President Franklin Roosevelt's Black Cabinet and the first African-American woman employed in several high-profile government jobs, including in the U.S. Department of Labor and at the War Department. In 1943, Pitts gave up a secure position with the federal government, rejected the Council of Family and Colleagues, and joined the Army. In 1954, at the age of 50, she took a solo 30-day road trip from Washington, D.C. through the segregated South to California and back. She then shared her adventures in a lively article in the Washington Afro-American newspaper. Nothing stopped Lucia Pitts from pursuing her dreams or encouraging others to follow theirs. Pitts was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1904 and raised by a protective family in Chicago's dynamic Bronzeville neighborhood. And when I teach her, I'm always proud that she's a daughter of Tennessee. My students don't seem to be too impressed. But anyway, I'm glad she's a Tennessean. Her mother, Janie Harris Pitts, worked as a housekeeper for a family in Glencoe, a village in New Trier Township on Chicago's affluent North Shore. Because Janie and Lucia boarded in a home in New Trier, Lucia was eligible to attend New Trier High School, from which she graduated in 1920. Janie Pitts was clearly intentional in moving to the North Shore and assuring her daughter one of the best high school educations in the country. Lucia recalls that New Trier, as one of America's most progressive and top performing schools, she enrolled in the academic track and, importantly, was introduced to poetry. And I have a few pictures I want to share with you. All right, so this is Lucia's senior portrait from the high school yearbook. As you could see here, she's actually born Lucia May Pitts, but like Helene Johnson, who was born Helen Johnson, Lucy changed her name to Lucia, which seemed maybe appropriate for a poet. And she went to elementary school in Chattanooga, middle school in Glencoe, and then of course high school in New Trier. And I actually wrote my co-author suggested that I contact the school, and I was sure they wouldn't have a yearbook from 1920, but the school's very wealthy, and the librarian was very helpful. She couldn't figure out how to scan the portrait for the book, but she FedExed me a copy of the yearbook, and it was just really interesting looking through the yearbook. Pitts and one other woman were the only two black students in the class, and this high school is still extant. I was actually, I was talking with a young man, and I was telling him about the book, and he said, "Oh, I couldn't remember the name of the school." And he said, and he said, "Oh, is it New Trier High School?" And his father actually went there. Okay, so that's Lucia, and I think I'll just leave that. Keep chatting. After high school, Pitts studied business at the Chicago Commercial Institute. The institute was located in the heart of Bronzeville, an African-American commercial and residential neighborhood that rivaled New York's Harlem and Boston's Roxbury. Gwendolyn Brooks celebrated the neighborhood in her first poetry collection, A Street in Bronzeville, which she published in 1945. Pitts grew into an intelligent, vivacious, attractive, and self-confident woman. An adventurous traveler, she lived and worked throughout the United States, including stints in Springfield, Illinois, Tuskegee, Alabama, New York City, Washington, D.C., Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and Los Angeles. In December 1942, after a decade in Washington, she stepped down from her position with the War Department and returned home to Chicago, where she worked as the first African-American personnel director in the U.S. Department of the Treasury. A year later, she left the Treasury Department and joined the U.S. Army's Women's Army Corps. Her first operational assignment was at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which is right south of Tucson. The Post newspaper, the Apache Sentinel, trumpeted her arrival in its April 7, 1944 issue, declaring, "Talented Private Lucia Pitts, welcome addition to the WIC." The article reviews her long list of accomplishments and underscores that, quote, "Few women enjoying such a colorful and successful career have voluntarily put it aside to serve where best they may with their armed forces." A highlight of her career, described in her 1968 memoir, One Negro White Story, was her service with the 6,888th Battalion during World War II in Birmingham, England, and Rouen, France. The battalion, nicknamed the 688, was the Army's only all-black, all-female battalion to serve overseas. The unit was tasked with tackling a massive backlog of mail from loved ones back home and getting it to the roughly 4 million troops, government workers, and Red Cross volunteers in the European theater. Pitts offered the following firsthand account of her activities. "The job of our battalion, the 6,888th Central Postal Directory, was to keep up with the addresses of our fighting men who were almost constantly on the move and see that their mail reached them. Under the general command of Major Charity Adams, the WICs did a noteworthy job of cleaning out the letters and packages we found piled up like mountains when we arrived, then keeping up with those constantly arriving. An average of 30,000 address changes had to be made every day. I worked as an administrative NCO, or non-commissioned officer, and had to keep the record, so I know whereof I speak." Pitts' account is easily corroborated by several sources. In recognition of the battalion's work, Fort Lee Army Post in Virginia, originally named for the Confederate General Robert E. Lee, was renamed Fort Gregg Adams after General Arthur Gregg, the Army's first African-American Lieutenant General, and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams, the 688 Battalion commander. In 2022, President Biden signed a bill awarding the 688 Battalion the nation's highest honor, the Congressional Gold Medal. The successes of the 688 have even recently emerged in popular culture. For example, in 2024, filmmaker Tyler Perry's movie, The 688, debuted on Netflix. Kerry Washington plays the lead, and Ebony Obsidian, Mariah Brown, Oprah Winfrey, and Susan Sarandon appeared in supporting roles. Now, I'd like to show just a brief excerpt from that film.
Soldiers, I am Captain Charity Adams. Welcome to the Women's Army Corps.
Delma, my wife and I have been talking about the problems we are having with the mail and our soldiers' morale.
Mr. President, this assignment has proven to be a logistical nightmare. Even tried the Women's Army Corps.
You mean the White Women's Army Corps?
Well, is there another?
Unspeakable, unspeakable.
Adams, you and the 688 Battalion are headed to Europe.
Should you open it? The Postal Battalion? They think the only thing we good for is to deliver some damn mail.
Would you like to see all the hangers, ma'am?
How many are there?
All of them.
Oh my God. Ladies, we have been ordered to provide hope. The soldiers have not heard from their loved ones, and their loved ones have not heard from them. When there is no mail, there is low morale. 688 Battalion! Forward march! They did not send us because they thought we could do it. We are here because they are sure we cannot. We are no strangers to making a shack a home. We are at war, and when you are at war, you make do. Unlike some other folks here, we have the most to prove. Now is where you show the proof. This is our mission. And we will not fail.
I have a couple of more pictures that I'd like to show you. All right, so this was September 1945. This is Lucia Pitts and three of her colleagues from the battalion who returned home. She returned from the European theater. They actually returned a bit early. And these are just pictures of other members of the battalion. Like some of the women actually stayed in the military and made it a career. There were some who served in Korea and also in Vietnam. Like one of her friends, one of Pitts's friends, served for 20 years and another one served for 25 years. And Pitts says in her memoir that her friends were able to see the transition from segregation to integration, and also the dissolution of the white as women were fully integrated into the army. One more picture here. Yeah. I mentioned that when after Pitts returned home and rejoined the civil service, she took this solo trip through the Jim Crow South out to California. She had fallen in love with LA, and she was stationed at Fort Huachuca in Arizona. She made a couple of trips there. So she drove cross country. She actually tried to enlist some friends to go with her, but no one had enough vacation time, or they didn't have the money, so she went by herself, which despite bad roads and a lot of other problems. But when she returned, she wrote this upbeat article. And this picture is actually taken as she was coming back. She stopped in Chicago and visited her family, and she went to Cleveland where she had more relatives, and ended up back in Washington, D.C. I want to just read the first paragraph. Spunky Lucia Pitts tells how she twice covered the continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific at a cost of $280. So she was traveling, and she left with $48, but her friends, a lot of the battalion members, boarded her overnight, and they all contributed. You could give her a little money for a trip. But her opening paragraph, alone, starting last spring with a mere $48 in my purse, I became a happy wanderer. Over mountains and waters, deserts and plains, I traveled 7,600 miles from Washington, D.C. To Pasadena and San Francisco, California, to Chicago and back to Washington. It was one of the most soul-satisfying things I ever did. And I'll leave that up also for the time being. So Despite her contributions to the armed forces and the U.S. Civil Service, I would argue that Pitch's greatest accomplishment is her innovative, compelling poetry, especially the strikingly frank and honest love poems. In 1935, the lawyer and gospel songwriter William Henry Huff acknowledged both her lyrical skill and her administrative work in President Roosevelt's government as he implored, "God bless the lady we call Lou, who deals in deals that we call new, and writes those lovely lines of love that almost take your breath." In 1938, the Chicago journalist and poet Frank Marshall Davis, who later retired in Hawaii, where he became a mentor to a young Barack Obama, observed, quote, "Lucia May Pitch in her creations bears out our opinion that she consistently writes the best love poetry produced among our women." Earlier, Pitch had either anticipated or perhaps received criticism that she focused too much on love poems. She immediately saw that inherent in such a critique is the fact that love is dismissed as a feminine preoccupation as opposed to the weighty subjects of male poets. Her 1928 poem, Decision, responds to such criticism with awareness and self-deprecating humor. "I shall not sing of love so much. It's foolish, awfully so. The world will think I know no else and rate me very low. I can sing of other things. Indeed, I really can. I'm not so awfully wrapped up in the genus they call man." Yet Pitch continued to compose love poems throughout her career. Pitch's love poetry places her in convention with modernist contemporaries like Edna St. Vincent Millay, and also suggests the influence of Chicago blues women Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. In Challenge, for example, the speaker disparages her admirers' restraint and tenderness and demands a bolder, more physical lover to quench her raging flame. In Confession, the speaker is both candid and bold as she rationalizes the freedom to express her sexuality without conventional constraints. She rejects, for instance, marriage and the traditional white wedding gown, which she describes tellingly as that weary gown. The poem concludes, "So I must confess there have been other loves, but not even to them have I been true. For all the while, my heart's real love was burning through to you," which I'm sure made him feel better, about that. Here the speaker frankly defends her faithlessness, not just to her current lover, but to past loves as well. The poem thus nods towards the sexual and emotional freedom expressed in the lyrics of Millay, Rainey, and Smith. Lucille Pitch was one of the few poets, along with Paul Laurence Dunbar, Helene Johnson, and Gwendolyn Brooks, who was as adept with free verse as with the sonnet. In 1934, she published The First Kiss, one of her most sexually explicit poems, in Dorothy West's new Boston-based literary journal, Challenge. The poem ends with an erotic couplet. "Though night is sable black, pregnant with rain, I am at peace, your mouth on mine again," or rain again. The following year, West published Lucille's Challenge. And I'm going to read this poem. Let me bring it up so you can follow along. Okay, so this is a challenge, and it you see it was from Earned Fate, which was a collection of sonnets that she tried tirelessly to publish. She even solicited the support of County Cullen, whom she met, and in Harlem around 1926. So she's actually lived in Harlem, Minnesota. I wish that I could find this poem. I mean, this book, Urns of Faith, but it hadn't surfaced so far. Okay, so this is challenge, and before I read, I just point out I enjoy teaching this poem. So it starts with this apostrophe, love. In the second line, it uses love as a verb, tenderness, alliteration, and I could just go through as I try to teach my students like elements of poetry. Okay, so love, I adore your timid tenderness. I love your soulful eyes, your naive way, your dark-hued head, your softly sweet caress. Of course, the sibilants here. The voiceless, lilting things you sometimes say, but I am clay, my sweet, to earth hard bound. I cry for passion's breath, hot on my cheek. Demands I make may frighten and confound, for these are what I need and what I seek. A burning love that deepest depths can plumb, a love that adds and heightens inborn fire, that leaves the breathless body tired and numb when it caters warmly to desire. You are so sweet, I love you much, but I am raging flame, dare you to touch. The speaker uses what some may term masculine imagery and intense sensory metaphors to direct her timid, gentlemanly partner. Lucia Pitts continued writing poetry until the end of her life. In 1962, she retired from the federal government in Washington, D.C., and moved to Los Angeles. In the winter of 1971, she published her last poem, Once Upon a Time, in California's The Southwest Wave. Its deceptively upbeat, celebratory tone captures her positive, unassuming personality and seems to presage her own passing. The speaker, clearly pitched, offers a sustained reflection on her loves, beginning with a young love when, quote, there were birds singing and bells ringing and exquisite pain and ecstasy. But that was a long ago. She concludes on a buoyant note. But no pity for me, I implore. I am so glad at last to be free and to belong only to me. She died in Los Angeles on December 17th, 1973, a month before her 70th birthday. Although Pitts never married or had children, her legacy is a body of poetry that captures a remarkable African-American poem. Her 1931 poem, Farewell, written for World War I veterans, seems a fitting self-tribute. And I want to end with this poem. Farewell. Out of the stillness, three lonely shots, clear and solemn, taps, to those who gave their utmost, farewell, farewell, farewell. Okay, thank you. I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Questions?
Oh, yes, Dr. Kuhn.
I was going to ask you, have we ordered your new book for the library?
I don't think so, but I sort of appreciate it. And I might mention the library was very, very helpful. Pitts authored about a 500-page autobiography. She was unsuccessful in publishing it, but it deals mostly with her work in the civil service and her efforts to bring other like African American women into the civil service. By the matter of fact, she was the very first Black woman to work for the U.S. federal government in Washington, D.C. Of course, lots of others followed her. the manuscript is at I think the University of Wisconsin, and interlibrary loan was very helpful in getting the microfilm for me. So yeah, I appreciate it there, Lord. Jeff. Oh yeah, yes ma'am. Okay.
Were there other poets writing? So you talked about the influence of modern university. Were there other poets writing similarly, like explicit poems like that, or was it mostly influenced by blues? And was Lucia sort of a special case? Mm-hmm.
Oh no. There were others, especially during the Harlem Renaissance. I don't know if you know the poet May Cowdery. If you know May Cowdery, yeah, she was from Philadelphia, and she was actually one of the few Black women to publish a book of poems. Like the title is escaping me, but it's you can easily find it. So I know like Cowdery published. Some very erotic poems about her lover. She was a lesbian, and she was even just explicit about her female lovers. Gwendolyn Bennett also comes to mind. I want to say Gwendolyn Brooks, but probably not so much with Brooks. Helen Johnson. Yeah, wrote some just very nice love poems. Like the title of this is my first book, This Waiting for Love, from Helen Johnson. Like she's tired of like waiting for love in a parlor while love is running up and down the street, like in the alley. So she wants to get out of the parlor. So okay. Well, thank you for that.
Thanks for an interesting talk. I was just wondering how you came across Pitts' work and what kind of archival efforts you needed to make to find some exposure.
Oh yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah. Actually, I was doing research on a World War I veteran who's Dewey Roscoe Jones, who's primarily a journalist. He studied at Columbia University, but he also published a novel. And I mentioned that Pitts published her early poems in the Lights and Shadows in the Chicago Tribune. So our library has the Chicago electronic copies of the Chicago Tribune, and so it's pretty easy to find her poems. But I was reading through Lights and Shadows, and like most of the poems were not very memorable, as you might expect, kind of pedestrian for like things published in a newspaper. But there was one poet just caught my attention. It was Pitts, and so I started just writing all or copying all the poems that I could find, and I was surprised that I hadn't heard of her, like someone who I thought she was very talented. And I sent some of the poems to my co-author, my writing partner, Dr. Davidson. I said, well, am I mistaken, or is this person just really talented? And she agreed with me. So that's how, like from that Lights and Shadows. And in addition to collecting the poems, we want to find out more about her. So we researched her biography. She doesn't have an archive, or we found a few letters, but most of our findings came from like newspapers, like articles in the press about her family, like census report, obituaries, and the few letters that we were able to find online. So it was very, I guess, serendipitous that I stumbled across her, and I was just kind of shocked that I never heard of her. She does appear in some Harlem Renaissance anthologies. For example, Maureen Honey's, I can't remember the name of the book right now, but Maureen Honey, Shadow Dreams, and Maureen Honey published a few pictures, poems. But we have like 100 poems, which seems like a nice number in this book. Carrie?
Yeah, thank you, Verner. I was drawn to the poem Challenge. You and the fact that it comes from the Burns of Faith sequence. And I'm wondering if you could write at all about that poem as a writing back to John Keats, in particular, Ode on a Grecian Urn. Because she echoes a lot of his lines there, but then she's writing back, and she's challenging Keats' view in that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and hers is like much more pleasurably erotic than his lines of saying, you know, it's preferable to be this figure on an urn because of time than a human who's going to suffer for his body experience or whatever. And she echoes a lot of his lines.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for.
You should get a copy.
Yeah, I'm going to read.
I like her challenge.
Yeah. Well, I guess that sort of speaks to the education that she got at New Trier High School. Yeah, I'm sure she would have studied the greats. So I actually love Keats, but that hadn't occurred to me though. So we don't discuss that point. But we're going to.
That also sounded very sort of Phyllis Wheatley-esque.
Oh, yeah. And she definitely would have.
Yeah.
Wheatley and
maybe some Bradstreet. I'm thinking about the eroticism of Bradstreet too.
Yeah. Urns of Fate. Ode on a Grecian Urn.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's not okay. Yeah. Mocha.
Did you come across, first of all, nice suit.
Oh, yeah. This is one of my church suits. But.
Were you able to come across any other women during who were from the 688 that was doing things that was similar to her as far as like writing, creating, like the arts? Was there any other women who were doing something, maybe not to that degree, but you could tell that they were also being overlooked?
Oh, yes, and there's actually there's some websites with the names of like all the women, and there are actually some interviews that you can find. They were like a very accomplished group of women. Now, as far as the arts, I know that one of Lucia Pitch's closest friends, and I'll discuss her in the book, I can't remember her name right now, but she was also from Chicago, and she was a classical trained violinist. Yeah, so she definitely made her mark in music. And after the war, she studied, I believe it was in Rome, on the GI Bill, and at President Roosevelt died when the unit was in England, and Pitch wrote this very nice poem in memory of President Roosevelt, and her friend, and I almost had her name, but she composed a song for him, and I'm trying to those are the two artists that come to mind, but there are educators and social workers and athletes. So they're just a very talented group of women. And I should mention that the 688 Battalion was self-contained, which means that they didn't receive any support from other Army units. So they did all the tasks, like from logistics to supply to cooking to mortuary service. They actually lost 3 members, and there were women who had worked as undertakers, I guess, back home, and they prepared the bodies. So and these 3 women are buried in France. I think the American Cemetery in France. But yeah, a very, very talented group of women. Those are just a few who come to mind.
In her autobiography or letters or anywhere, did you ever talk about the relationship between her poetry and being in civil service? Like they seem, in some ways, such different pursuits. Like being an administrator versus being a poet of erotic love. But I wonder if she ever considered how those 2 careers lined up, or if just because there's a lot of other poets working for the government during World War II, who did sort of think about that.
Mm-hmm. But nothing comes to mind, but she did write quite a bit of like war poetry, and she wrote.
Is it similarly focused on people back home, and does it cover the battlefront, her war poetry, or is it more sentimental?
No. Well, one of her best poems is a tribute to the 99th Pursuit Squadron, or the Tuskegee Airmen, whom she calls our brown flower boys, I believe. It's a long poem. She just celebrates the Tuskegee Airmen who are riding the moon, riding the sky out there. And I'm not. Did you want to have a follow up? I kind of missed. Okay. So I think the portrait was it was realistic. I mean, I don't think it was. I wouldn't characterize it as sentimental. And one of her best known poems is "A Wife Speaks to a Soldier." It's a long poem where she speaks to her like the men, her male colleagues, and she says, "You didn't want us here. You wanted us back home, dressed in the flimsy nightgowns, waiting for your return." But she said, "There's a job to be done, and we volunteered, and we're doing it." That kind of thing. So she was, but I don't remember her writing much about the civil service. Other questions? How are we doing on time? Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So yeah, who we got? Anyone else? Well, I've enjoyed the questions.